Greetings and welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Heart and Soul Broadcasting Services. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today I'm in conversation with Ralph Tendai Mupita, President and CEO of MTN Group. Enjoy this inspirational conversation. Ralph Tendai Mupita, welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Trevor, thanks very much. It's a privilege to be on this platform and looking to this conversation and also asking you some questions.
Absolutely. I look forward to your questions. I'm grateful that you found the time because, you know, a couple hours ago you were in the air, flying from one place to the other. For you to create this time, truly grateful. And I have no doubt that this conversation is going to inspire quite a lot of people.
Thank you.
Ralph, I'll start with your dream. When you were 10 years old, you dreamt going to the moon, but someone discouraged you from that dream. And they said, and what was your response to that?
Yeah, Trevor, I mean, people ask me about that and sometimes I chuckle a bit because it was actually quite a transformative point in my life. 10 years old, you're at that stage, you think everything is possible. There's nothing that kind of holds you back. And I was told that, you know, there are people going to, there have been people going to the moon, and I looked at all of them and they were white, okay? And I said, you know, I want to go to the moon. They said, no, but black people don't go to the moon. I said, but why? Never got a satisfactory answer, but it got me very curious, and it got me really, really thinking about, you know, why are there limitations to people? I come from a small town. Yes, I grew up in Mutare, but why should that be limiting? So I was never happy about it. I think I was once misquoted to say I reconciled with. That's not true.
I mean, at 10 years old, and you say you have this dream, and somebody said, no, it's impossible. What did that do to you? Does it crush you as a 10-year-old, or you keep dreaming?
No, it didn't crush me. It kept me dreaming, and it kept me searching for, what is possible. Trying to figure out, are there really real boundaries for people? What is it that, you really can't do? Today I talk, when I speak to young folk, I talk about no one is limited, but it started a very kind of curious process in my head about, limitations. Where are the boundaries? Where are the limitations? Growing up in a small town like Mutare, why couldn't I be something that is on a world stage? I used to ask myself those things. So it didn't crush me, just created more curiosity.
What, within that context, what should we be saying to youngsters who are watching us from all over the world, and they've got these crazy dreams? What realistically do you say? You say be realistic, be pragmatic, or dream on?
I say dream on because, you never know until you try. And, my life, if anything, has been about trying things that sometimes people would say you shouldn't be doing or you can't do. I always ask people to encourage people to really think about what it is that they're really passionate about, what really stirs them inside. And if that stirring is very, very kind of profound, and gets them up in the morning, they must try and pursue it. They might not succeed, but they will learn something on the journey. So I don't believe there are any limitations. People are not limited. Limitations are things that constructs we put around ourselves. So, I mean, my belief system, and I try and encourage my children and people I meet, is keep dreaming. Don't have self-limiting beliefs.
Tell me, you were born in Mutare?
No, I was actually born at Goromonzi High School.
Aha.
Yeah, my father taught maths and physics at Goromonzi, both O-level and A-level in the 70s. You know well that Goromonzi was one of very few schools that offered A-levels for black people during the days of Rhodesia. So I was born At Goromonzi,
Goromonzi.
yeah, all my siblings were also born there. A very interesting life, surrounded by students. My mother was a nursing sister at Goromonzi High School in the 70s. So we all grew up there in a little bit of an enclave whilst this war is going on around us. I only really got to understand what was happening when we moved from Goromonzi to Mutare. So we left Goromonzi in 1978, I think. So I was then 6 years old.
That's
And
interesting.
then we moved to Mutare.
I see.
And then the move to Mutare is the one where I kind of really understood what was going on. I was 7 years old then, so you could also argue that 7 years old shouldn't really know too much about what's going on. You should have this idyllic life. So I'm born in Goromonzi.
So your dad taught physics and maths, you say.
Yeah.
Talk to me now about, given where you are now as president and CEO of MTN Group.
Yeah.
When you look at your upbringing, what is it that you got the most from your father and from your mother?
Yeah, my father's late now, so he died about 13 years ago, but my mother's still strong and going on. From my parents, my father in particular, he had this belief that education will set you free. I mean, he taught, as I said, maths and physics. In particular, was passionate about maths. Our library was probably 3/4 maths and physics books, and then history and National Geographic books then would have been the other third. But he was a deep believer in the ability for education to transform your life, and kind of linking it back to this thing about possibilities. So it was pretty hard on us about being diligent readers, and I'll tell you an interesting story about one time the TV blew up. Remember those big TVs we used to have in the 80s? He didn't fix it for 2 or 3 years. For sure he could have fixed it, but that got us to read. So there's no TV, you can't watch Night Ride or whatever. So myself and my siblings were always reading, and so he was of the view around education will set you free. He was always a very moral guy. So he says there's always right and wrong in most situations, and leaned very heavily towards the right side. I'm not sure I've always got that right from that. My mother, as I said, my mother's alive, very spiritual lady, deep in her faith. From her side, it's all about, this too shall pass. She has this tremendous belief that there are no situations that are permanently difficult. So, this too shall pass. And as I said, we grew up, I had 3 other siblings, grew up a very kind of idyllic, middle class, typical Zimbabwean lifestyle. I mean, we weren't kind of materially wealthy. We were wealthy with books and ideas. That's what we grew up and thinking about ideas. And that's why this crazy, I want to go to the moon kind of thing came from. Because I read about it, I said, why shouldn't I? So surrounded by a lot of love, which created this safety net for us to explore. But I was the naughtiest of the 4. So if you ask my siblings, they'll say, well, we weren't sure this guy would be president one day because he was very naughty as a kid. But yeah, our parents gave me a very solid foundation.
So your primary school, just talk to me through your primary school, high
Mutare.
school.
Yeah,
Mutare,
primary school, I went to Mutare Junior School, a government school. We were the first black people at the school. It was a very kind of traumatic experience. All your relationships have been, black relationships. You don't really engage. So I went to, I think it was called Standard 1. I can't remember what these things were. No, Kindergarten 1. Kindergarten 1. I arrived at the school. This is 1979. Only black kid in the school. So I was kindergarten. My 2 elder siblings went to the proper primary school. So there are at least 2 or 3 other black kids. And it was like a complete awakening. And I remember being kind of ostracized right there at the beginning. No one wants to play with me because, there's this black kid at the school. But that process also, I was a bit of an athlete. So when everyone saw me, winning the sack races and other things that kids do then, people wanted to befriend me. But it was also a great experience with I had really great teachers. Even at the grade 3 level, I remember a teacher called Mrs. Baisley. She spoke about, anything you can conceive and believe you can achieve. CBA, she used to call it. That was a grade 3. So it comes back to this going to the moon idea and her belief. I had really great, and it was a great time. I wasn't.
But you do say it was traumatic. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, it was just the trauma of not being accepted.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you've come through. You're 6, 7 years old, and you're not just being accepted because just purely of your color. I got over it, and my parents helped me get over it, pretty quickly. Their advice then was, just do well in class. You got a bit of a mathematical brain. You're very good at sport. Just do those things, and in a term, they'll all run to you, which is actually what happened. So the trauma didn't last.
So no scars at all.
No scars. No scars from there. There were some scars. The scar that's deep in my mind. Actually, let me take you a little bit back.
Yeah.
Is at the turn of what was then Zimbabwe Rhodesia. The kind of white sports clubs became open in Mutare. So we went to one called in Penalonga with my dad and my grandfather and my sibling. My mother, she was working. She was on duty as a nursing sister at Mutare General Hospital. We were, again, this thing about being, my dad was always saying, if something's open, we're going to do it. So we wanted to go to this white sports club outside Penalonga. And this white gentleman comes up and says, you're not allowed. But, the laws had changed. Black people could go to these places. Then this 16-year-old boy talks to my grandfather and my father, and he calls them boys. That scar as a 6, 7-year-old still there.
Wow.
And I often tell people, please don't call me boy, because it takes me way back.
Yeah.
But what the scar there was...
It's amazing how we forget those things, isn't it?
No, it's amazing. It's amazing. I haven't really forgotten it, because what I said to myself, I'll never find myself in a situation where me or my people, and my people can be as broad as you want it to be, humiliated. We have our dignity, we're people. And, fast forward thinking about what I do at MTN, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do as MTN is give people dignity and hope by being able to communicate, participate in financial services. But I'm connecting the purpose now, the dots. So primary school was very idyllic, played sports. Many people, who might be watching this will remember me more as a cricketer. I played Zimbabwe Schools cricket, but I honed my cricketing skills at Mutare Junior School. Opening bowler, very fast. You wouldn't have been able to bat against my speed. So yeah, it was a great, but as I got to grade 7, I had this urge to kind of leave. And I told my parents that, look, somehow I'm not going to do high school in Mutare. I think I want to leave home. At 12, I said, look, I want to go.
At 12 years old?
Yeah, I wanted to go to do boarding in Form 1. I said, I just want to go boarding in Harare or somewhere. I said, where are you going to? I said, no, I'm going to apply to schools. Applied to schools. So I went to Churchill for Form 1 to Form 4. And enjoyed that time as well. Lots of cricket, lots of athletics as well. So some people remember me as a track as well. So people say, whatever happened to this guy? He was
marathon?
No, not marathon. Distances. I was short distances.
Okay.
So I did 100 and 200, and I did long and triple. I think I held the Mashonaland under 13 triple jump record for probably a decade, I think. So.
And in national colors?
I had national colors in cricket.
Wow.
So cricket. So cricket. I played for Zimbabwe Schools cricket. So that was my thing. I also played rugby, but I played for Madabililand Schools rugby. But rugby, I played it because it was the macho thing to do. I didn't really enjoy the sport. I didn't enjoy all that hurt and what have you. But cricket was very passionate about it.
And then high school?
Yeah, so high school is Churchill, and then I finished A-levels from high school. I finished at Plumtree.
Plumtree High.
So Plumtree, I moved to Plumtree. I was always pursuing where the cricket was going to be played. And
very sporty Plumtree, isn't it?
Yeah, I was very sporty during those days. And the reason I chose Plumtree, because I was told, look, if you're going to play for Zimbabwe Schools cricket, the time I was there, kind of very late 80s, right at the beginning of the 90s, if you weren't at Falcon or Plumtree, and if maybe you're lucky Peter also or PE, you never made the team. So I said, okay, well, let me go where I'm most likely to play. So I went to play there, really enjoyed it again. So yeah, I saw
I didn't
Mutare.
I didn't know the sporty background.
I know sports was my thing. I loved it.
Is it still your thing?
It's still my thing. Although, with age, I probably now, I would lie if I say I'm consistent with my marathon running. But about, 7 years back, I was very consistent. I was running marathons, ultra marathons. So, yeah.
And then when did you decide you're going to study engineering at UCT?
I didn't really decide it, Trevor. We'll come back to another thing that I think people's lives are filled with, but they don't always know what I call serendipity. Things happen while you're planning. I had no plans to come to South Africa. My plans were actually to go to the UK. I was going to read at one of those colleges, but there was a certain girl I was very interested in. She said she's going to South Africa. And I said, geez, yeah, I'm planning to go. So I kind of abandoned the idea of going to the UK to try follow her.
That's interesting.
She never rocks up in South Africa.
Poor you.
Poor me. And then I changed my mind and I said, I'm going to UCT. And said I'll study civil engineering. I wasn't sure which engineering in particular, but I knew two uncles were civil engineers. I said, well, I know them, so maybe I should try what they're doing. So that's how I ended up doing engineering at University of Cape Town. Just like that.
And then after that, you joined Hugh and English,
Yes.
civil engineering, and you spend some time there. And what changes your mind to want to go and do an MBA in finance or something?
So what happened was that, again, my parents said, you're going to UCT, how are you going to pay for the fees? We can't pay for those fees. I said, no, I think I'll get a scholarship or bursary, which I did. So I got from Ho and Ingalls, and they sponsored first year, second year, third year, fourth year. And then they said, you must come and work for us for 4 years. I said, yeah, what's the real big deal? You're getting paid. So I worked for them pretty much the 4 years. And then I said, again, I think I need to move on. I want to try something that really is going to challenge me, put me in a new space of discomfort, so I can learn again. I was feeling the learning curve was flattening at that stage.
How old were you?
I was 26, 27.
Already you're thinking of curves flattening. That's...
Yeah, I felt that, I operate best when there's a little bit of an edge.
Bit of tension.
When there's a little bit of tension and a little bit of uncertainty in myself. When I feel too sure, I think it's a very dangerous place because you get hubris and you make assumptions, you make errors. So, but at that stage, somebody will say, well, but you're beginning. Why would you? And I was working for a civil engineering contracting firm, Ho and Ingalls, as you said. But I just felt that there was something else I needed to do. And
I will stop you there because I'm trying to imagine myself 26 years old and the tension, I didn't have any of that. I was just cruising.
No, it's interesting that you say that because I was asked the same question, and my dad asked me this thing, and he said, "Hey, but you're an engineer. What's this thing you're gonna do an MBA?
Yeah.
Are you gonna go back to engineering?" I said, "No, I don't think I'll go back to engineering. What are you gonna do?" I said, "I'm not sure, but I think I might want to go into investment banking, onward consulting, financial services. I just want to try something else."
Where did that thinking come from? Is it the tension that you're feeling, or the circles that you're around, or there's somebody that you're watching who's inspiring you?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting point. I had been thinking about, if I look kind of 10 years out, would I see myself as an engineer and doing this work? I said no. So I said, no, I don't. So, well, if you don't see it, why don't you change? That's a conversation I had with myself. And I said, well, look, what is engineering at the end of the day? What did I learn in those 4 years in engineering? What I learned is problem solving. How to look at a problem, figure out how do you solve it, who do you need? And I said, well, actually financial services and consulting, in particular consulting is where I really wanted to go. I thought, well, I might end up with McKinsey or whatever. I'm a problem solver. That's what I really do. And consulting is problem solving. So that's where I went in with consulting, but it could end up investment banking or financial services. So in consulting, after I went for an interview with one of the big consulting firms while I was at University of Cape Town, that interview didn't go well for me or for them. And I said, I don't want to be with these folk, because they told me something like, when you come in as an associate, you're going to work X number of hours. And I said, no, I don't think I want a job where I'm just putting PowerPoint presentations. That's what they told me I would do. So I end up in Old Mutual, again, serendipity, by them coming to University of Cape Town to say, hey, we hear you've got into the MBA program. Why don't we pay for your fees? So I got this record of people paying for my fees, which I always told my parents that the last time they paid for my school fees was when I was 12. Because I forgot to tell a story that actually my cricket was so good that I was in the Zimbabwe Cricket Union scholarship for all through high school. So all through high school, so my parents never paid. So I said, Old Mutual rocks up and said, no, we'll pay for you, and you just need to work for us for 1 year, and then you're free. I mean, I ended up spending 17 years, but I only had 1 year commitment. So I get interviewed by this HR folk at Old Mutual, and they said, well, look, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to do asset management. I want to do, infrastructure, because I've been an engineer. I know how to, build roads and all of this stuff. And with my MBA and the finance I've learned, surely I'll be a good portfolio manager. I lasted 15 minutes in an interview with a guy called Derek Msibi. Shame, Derek, if he's watching. he put me on the right path. So he said, no, you're not a chartered accountant. You can't do this thing.
Wow.
You're an engineer. So I got rejected from that role. And then they said, well, look, there's only one other role to do, and you need to work for this other guy called Paul Nratty. No one wants to work for Paul Nratty. Hope Paul is not watching. Paul is now the CEO of Sanlam. But I went to work for Paul, and that was quite a transformative experience. In 3 years, 4 years of working for him directly at the start, I think I packed 20 years in. He was such a good mentor. So the other thing I often tell people is that accidentally you meet some people who mentor you, or can transform your career, because you never do it all by yourself.
Absolutely.
There's no, people who come in and they can say whatever station they hold, they got there by themselves. So Paul is the guy who got me.
Break it down for us in terms of when you say he mentored you.
Yeah.
You pegged in 20 years and 7 years. What do you mean? How did he mentor you?
So he came. I was told I was going to go work for this guy, and I went to ask him, and I said, look, I don't know anything about this industry. So the first thing, I was very open and transparent, but I said, I work hard. And I'm very prepared to learn. But this place is so complex. Can you at least help me figure out, what is the kind of business model for an insurance company? And he wrote a little formula for me, which I kept for many, many years. But he says, this is how we make money. Everything depends on these 5 variables. No matter how complicated life is, it's these 5 variables that create value here. But if you're going to work hard, you work for me, and you deliver, I'll keep giving you, more and more insights. So it wasn't like official mentoring, but I could see he was always kind of looking after me. Even when I stopped reporting to him, he would check up on me, how are you doing? He'd give me good feedback, like you did a lousy job on this thing. And that thing you did a good job. And a mentor generally is somebody who is truthful but supportive.
Is it not because you went in there with a teachable spirit? You went in there, you raised your hand, Ralph, and you said, I don't know anything about this, teach me.
But, Trevor, it's something that my father left in me. So don't go into a situation where, if you don't know, you don't know. But you know what you can offer in that situation. Because I said to Paul, look, I can run this program, I can do all of these things, but you need to help me here and there. Just being, truthful and objective about your particular position in life. So I was teachable. I think I remain teachable to this day. I've learned a couple of industries along the way. And that point that you raise about being teachable and being open to saying, I don't know. And then surrounding yourself or finding the people who know. It's not a shame.
People who are better than you.
People who are better than you. You're going to get me onto another topic, which is really, I always look to build a team that every member in that team, I know on their domain expertise, they're better than me. That's the team I want. Because then my job actually is easy, to be honest. When you're the leader and basically a conductor, you're not playing an instrument. But I think I was teachable. He can confess with I was not. But it was my first experience then was about 2000, 2002, of the power of, professional mentoring within the work context. We weren't meeting and sharing notes, but it was mentoring in the work situation, getting feedback. You did very well here. Here's why you did well. You didn't do so well here. Here's why you didn't do. And I was receptive to both forms of feedback. And I always say to people that, be really receptive to feedback, both positive and negative. The negative is more difficult to accept, but if you really kind of be objective, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
So he was that at Old Mutual. And Old Mutual was a lovely time, and I kind of had multiple careers in 17 years there.
So Ralph, you stay with Old Mutual, ultimately as the CEO of emerging markets, responsible for 19 countries, 19 million customers, and $1 trillion $1 trillion runs in assets. Talk to me about your major takeaways of that 16 years spent at Old Mutual. What were the lessons learned?
Yeah, it was a great place to learn and develop my own set of skill sets during that time at Old Mutual. I would say at Old Mutual, beyond learning the new trade of financial services, insurance, asset management, banking, kind of life skills more generally. I kind of honed in, kind of working in big, complex teams and working through really big challenges. I think that over the years would have been kind of a general statement, but quite specific things. Because we were such a diverse business with all sorts of services, although under the umbrella of financial services, I learned to work across cultures because we're operating in all these markets. So that was one thing I learned very quickly at Old Mutual.
That's important, isn't it?
Absolutely important. Just the nuances of different cultures. Ghana and Nigeria are very different markets. I also learned, some of the softer skills I'd not really learned as an engineer. Remember, I'm an engineer. Engineers always have the hard skills. So now I had to learn, soft skills. Communication becomes much, much more important, and the engineers generally think that I think my leadership profile strengthened while I was at Old Mutual. I really became, quite okay with, going kind of deep inside of me to really figure out, who I am. Kind of self-mastery. And what that then creates, there's opportunities or challenges for myself. I learned also at Old Mutual, just how to think about, building new businesses. I was involved in building, one or two big businesses while at Old Mutual. So yeah, a lot that's I'm still using today at MTN. It was a great place.
You were instrumental, correct me if I'm wrong, in the splitting up of Old Mutual into 4 separate units, which were separately listed.
Yeah.
Did you play a role there? And if you did, what were the lessons for you? Because I remember that particular time, there was a lot of heavy lifting involved in that enterprise.
Yeah, I was there when the separation strategy was, I was part of the Group Exco, when the separation strategy was proposed to the board and approved, that we were split into 4 units. I was going to lead the unit that was going to re-domicile as Old Mutual back in South Africa. I left before that happened. So the strategy there was to say, look, you are this conglomerate business that's operating in all these markets, and actually there's very little synergies. So why are we a group when the synergies are not there? And hence we think that actually there's more value in breaking up the businesses, and putting these specific businesses in the shareholders that would appreciate these businesses. So I was involved in the thinking. I remember when we met at some place in London, or outside London, where the strategy was proposed. Bruce Hempel was the group CEO at that stage, and we all agreed that there were no more synergies. There was very little synergy between the business I run in emerging markets and Paul Feeney's in the UK. So we started the path of kind of structurally separating the businesses, and we'd made a lot of progress. But I left just before that happened. I think I left a year before, and and that's when I took the decision. That also, even if I was going to be the CEO of this, re-domiciled and listed Old Mutual business, I wasn't sure that I was coming back to something I raised early on about learning curve effects. I wasn't learning as much, and I felt
not anymore after 16 years.
After 16 years, I didn't feel I was learning much, and I needed a new challenge. I wasn't sure what that challenge was, but I remember telling my wife very early in 2016 that I don't think I'll still be at Old Mutual at the end of this year. She says, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm not sure, but I feel I need something bigger, something more challenging, something disruptive."
I'm a big believer in, if you face life with expectancy and hope, that the world does give you something.
Yeah, it does.
So the opportunity for MTN comes up. Is that what happens?
Yeah, it's an interesting. I just want to comment on what you said,
yeah.
because I do, coming back to the influence of mothers.
Yes.
My mother, as I said, she's a very spiritual person. As I said earlier on, this too shall pass, but she believes in intentions. If you intend it, the kind of universe ultimately conspires. So if you voice this thing out there that says, I think I need a growth, and the opportunities start coming your way. And how I ended up at MTN is also a little bit of a serendipitous, because, I have this, request by somebody say, please go see Putumantleko. He wants to have a cup of coffee. I was still at Old Mutual then, and he was executive chair at MTN then. I thought, oh, no, maybe I'm going to talk about mobile money. Because I'd always been thinking that, the future of financial services is on the phone. Bank branches are, is infrastructure of the past. And I say that with respect. So I go and have this coffee with him. He doesn't drink coffee, he's drinking tea. So I'm having coffee at like 4 o'clock. This is probably around July, August 2016. And he said, no, I actually wanted us to figure out whether are you keen to come join us. We're rebuilding MTN. We've seen you do your thing at Old Mutual, work in a Pan-African context. You understand operating in emerging markets and all of that. And I said, but I'm a telco guy. I understand telecommunications, from my physics days at A levels, but never really studied it. But he took one further and said, no, we think you should put your hand up for us to consider you as a CFO. I said, I've never studied. I'm not even a chartered accountant. But I reflected literally 24 hours. I spoke to my wife about it and said, no, this is the proposition at hand. He wants me to get into the process. And then I phoned him the next day. I said, yeah, why don't we do it? And I mean, a few months later, it comes on the public and people just completely say, what's wrong with this guy? He's going to be CEO of Old Mutual. Now he's going to be CFO at MTN. What's he thinking? But
what was your thinking process? Because, what's your thinking process, Trey?
No, my thinking process was, look, I mean, this is, there's a little bit of my side that's adventurous, We all have little adventurous selves inside of us, I would like to think. But there's a part of me that said, well, wouldn't it be great to learn, let me do this finance thing, for a couple of years. Maybe I might be good, maybe I might not be so good at it. But I just said, look, I'm just going to back myself to learn a new sector. I'm going to learn actually a new function. I know what a good CFO looks like because I've been a CEO many years. So let me frame it from the perspective of, so I don't think I was like a brilliant technical CFO, probably was a very bad one at that.
But
I brought the strategy.
You lasted 3 years, eh?
Yeah, I lasted 3 years, but I think I brought the disciplines of capital management and the kind of finance strategy.
Okay.
Because I'd played strategy roles also before, so strategy was an area that I thought I had decent skills. So I cast that on, and I said, what does the company need? The company needs to really think about strengthening its balance sheet. How does it do that? And then I get the team to do the work. Get the smart folk to figure out how do we get the balance sheet? How do we grow? And worked with Rob Schuster, who was then the CEO. But as I said, it was 3 years, but it was, I learned a lot during that period. And now I've got a better feel, of just the numbers. I can see a number and I can say, I think the number's wrong. I don't know why, but it's wrong. I'm generally right.
You are a good person to have around. Correct me, is this the time that MTN is battling with the SIM registration problem in Nigeria? Is it the time that MTN is getting bad press? You are CFO and you're trying to fix this stuff? Talk to me about that.
No, so this the challenges, the real existential challenge that happened to MTN were in 2015.
Okay.
With the SIM registration fine in Nigeria. It started with 5.2 billion. It was settled, more around 1.5 billion or thereabouts. So that happened before I joined.
Okay.
So there's a process of rebuilding the team. Rob Schuster had been appointed group CEO, and I then came in as a group CEO. Jens Scholten-Bockham, who's still at MTN, he came in as group. So there was a rebuilding of the leadership to try and address the historical issues and get the business to perform. Yeah, we've had some challenges, since I was there as CFO in Nigeria as well and other markets. Look, we operated, the other thing I learned was at Old Mutual was, when you operate in emerging markets, you must have the risk appetite to operate in them. Things happen. But if you generate the right return profile on a risk-adjusted basis, you're doing the right thing. So,
do you think that you come in as this stuff has happened?
Yeah.
In your view, were these culture issues, or this is MTN having grown too big, too quickly, expanding aggressively, geographical? What is your reading? What is your take?
Yeah, look, it's always easy to look
hindsight.
So in hindsight, you always have a perfect answer. But I think I would attribute it to a couple of things. I think the first is that the risk management systems were not as strong as they needed to be, because we came and rebuilt. The risk was reporting to me when I joined, or was moved to me when I joined, and I kind of really worked with the team. It was a collective effort, but we tried to build kind of industrial strength risk management system, which we have today. I think that's the one. I think when I talk to the people who have been in the company for some time, that there was a little bit of the hubris of success.
Yeah.
That kind of sets in, and I'm always fearful of. You heard me about learning curve effects. The company had been exceptionally successful, and some of the folk were saying, look, there was a bit of a hubris of success. When there was a communication from the authorities, there wasn't as rapid a response. I wasn't there, so I can't really be categoric. And I think the final point would have been that, beyond those 2 points, there were some things that we should have been able to see that, as a company we didn't see. But, as I said, this is hindsight. But so we came in at the time when we had to deal with these things historic and kind of rebuild the business. It was a lot of hard work, but I'm never fearful of work. So I really enjoyed that time. But we were like working 7 days a week for about 2 to 3 years. But I had fun as well.
They say that you've been 20 months in the job now, almost.
Yeah, I don't count the months, but in September I'd have been 20. Yeah, it's
20 months.
Yeah, 20
so you've
months.
been 20 months in the job, and I hear a lot of people say you've spoken quite a lot right now, Ralph, about teams and the emphasis of the team contributing to success and taking the kudos for that. Some people say to me, it's very lonely at the top. Has the past 20 months been lonely? Are you beginning to feel it?
Yeah, I mean, I was CEO before I became, at Old Mutual, I was CEO for about, at the emerging markets level for about 5 years. So I understood the loneliness of the CEO job before I went to be CFO and then come back as CEO. So I knew that this is a very lonely, position. But you can, there are ways around that loneliness that I think, you can be less lonely. I mean, if you're the type of leader who believes you have all the answers, it is exceptionally lonely. Because what then happens is everyone says, okay, that person has all the answers. Let's wait for them to do all the thinking.
Yeah.
So my approach has always been to tap the wisdom of the team, to tap the board, and then we make the decisions. And we make the decisions with the information we have at that time. The facts may change tomorrow, but at the time we make the decisions, we took the best views at the particular point in time. I'm very comfortable with that. But it may end up that the decision in hindsight or 2 months down the track is wrong. If you can still change it, because things have changed, the circumstances have changed, change your action. So, I mean, I lean on the board, I lean on my team. I always come into a situation with a view. I try a lot not to express my view early, because as a CEO, if you express your views early, people then go quiet. But my team says, Ralph, you're not brilliant at that. You exert your views very early. But I encourage them to challenge and say, no, Ralph, you said this, but we disagree. So I try and build teams that are...
but we all, Ralph, I mean, I can sense your leadership style.
Yeah.
Right? But is there a place or a moment where you have stuff that is troubling you, that you can't share with your colleagues?
Yeah.
Stuff that you can't take to your wife because you're going to scare her. Well, where do you go when you've got those moments, and moments where you have to own up to your vulnerabilities, as it were?
Yeah, when that happens, you're absolutely right that there are those moments that are actually at the extreme where you could scare people by talking to them about it. Yeah, I mean, I go deep inside of myself.
Wow.
I mean, I try and stay relatively active, so I try and be quite disciplined. I'm not always perfect these days, but, I find that if I gym or I run and I've got my music on, and it sounds very odd, it might even sound a little bit corny, but, you get into a really flow state, what I call flow state. And then I really, in that flow state, can figure out, I said, I actually don't know. I don't have an answer here. And actually, it's okay, Something really bad could happen. If I know if I know what the drivers are, I would, let's say, maybe even discuss it with the chairman. The two people I talk to about, kind of like deep vulnerabilities. And I always say, sometimes they can do what they like with it. I have to tell them. And the chairman, I talk to my wife about it. But if I can't talk to them, I go deep in myself. And then I just say...
How do you do that? Is it just running? Is it...
No, I would call it, Trevor, it's just kind of... I think, the word meditation is sometimes used in a way that people think about it in the context of yoga and things like that. And I'm sure it's there. But in my mind, I just go into a quiet place. I mean, I am, by the way, quite a shy person. But I'm very contemplative, reflective. But I go deep and I just say, look, I'm going to hold this. I go back to that thing I said to you earlier, this too shall pass. So I do, when those kind of existential moments hit you, I say, well, this will pass. Let me try and focus on the things I can control. Because there are many things in life that you can't control, and worrying about them is not going to help. But if you figure out what you can control, I think you feel much better. The word is feel. You feel much better about those things that you can't control that may be quite existential and may shock you. We operate, right now, MTN, we're 19 countries, a couple in the Middle East, on the African continent. While we're sitting here, something could be happening. But, I have to trust the team, I have to trust. So the CEO job is lonely. And it's not what people think it is. People think it's
all glamour.
It's all glamour. It's all easy.
Cocktail parties,
private jets, and all of that. As you said, I mean, I arrived today from Tehran.
Yeah.
And Shay, one of the executives says, Ralph, you're always smiling at every meeting, but we drag you from 8 in the morning until 10:30 at night. Don't you get tired? I said, I do. I said, when I get back to the hotel room, I completely collapse. I'm a human being. But you know, but I love the responsibility of leadership. I love
You love the responsibility of leadership, and I must say, I think right up to now, you've spoken about your wife 4 to 5 times. She's a sounding board, and I've learned, Ralph, that if home is not stable, it's very difficult to come in and present a stable Ralph in the workplace. So you've said, and correct me if I'm wrong, your wife, Mokele, is a real partner for me. I probably won't be where I am today without her. Unpack that for us.
No, that's true. I mean, she kicks me out of bed and says, "Go and work for the family." No, look, to your point, and I said this to my colleagues, is that you come to work whole, and I can see a situation where somebody, their issues at home, even if they don't tell me, or within their environment, I say, "Is everything okay?" And then if they're close enough, they end up telling, "We'll try and help." When I come back to my situation, I always say, you know, in the workplace, you will perform better. It's a general statement. I'm sure it's not always true, but I would like to think it's generally correct. That, you know, the more stable things or open and transparent things are at home, the better at work. Yeah. So my wife, Magole, is a board member on my personal board. My personal board never meets.
Yeah.
My personal board never meets.
I like that. I will use that one day. Yeah.
Yeah, the personal board never meets because, you know, you have a couple of people who
are on the board.
Who are on your board.
But they don't meet. You meet them.
You meet them one by one. So she's probably the chairperson of my personal board, if I ask. Yeah. So
what other people are on that board?
My mother will be on that board.
Okay.
Yeah, she certainly would be. There are 2 other people that I've worked with in the past that are there, and I tap into their wisdom once in a while, ask them questions, give answers. 60% of the answers I might disagree, but the 40 that I agree with, I generally find that, you know, it helps me. I encourage people to think about personal boards a lot.
Wow.
To say, you know, if think of yourself like a company or corporation, and in many respects you are. You're an enterprise of sorts. And, you know, are there people who are being constructively critical and supportive of you?
And you need them.
And you need them. You need them in all situations. Yeah. So, and people talk about you need your village. Maybe you need your village, but the personal board is the couple of people that are kind of actively, and they'll come and tell you really messed up here, and here's why. And you take and you reflect and you course correct. So
and you grow.
And you grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unpack for me now. So you are President and Chief Executive Officer of the MTN Group. In a nutshell, describe MTN to us. What does it look like?
MTN.
Number of people, revenues, geographic spread, to give us a context.
Yeah, MTN is massive. And I feel the president title when I leave the South African shores, because it feels bigger when you're in the markets, XSA.
America.
It feels really big. So, I mean, we have over 270 million customers using our services. So 270, not a small number. You know, we make, in Rand terms, you know, over 180 billion Rand of revenue. 17,000 people working in our business across 19 markets. You know, of those, 17 on the African continent. So pretty much 1 in 3 African countries, there's an MTN business there. And we're in 2 in the Middle East, we're in Iran, we're in Afghanistan. So yeah, it's a complex, it's a big business. But at the end of the day, I say to people, what are we doing? And I come back to the dignity and giving people hope. You know, we're in the business of delivering digital services and financial services. And our customers are basically people, mass market, people who have basically lower disposable income to spend. We try to make a business out of people spending $4 a month in communication services and financial services. So we talk about, you know, we are a mission-driven business that, you know, is focused on ensuring that everybody can access the benefits of a modern connected life.
Right.
That's what we do. Every day we get up And I always add a little bit of flavor to that to say that, but when we do that, it must give our people dignity and hope. I come back to that point I raised earlier on that, us Africans, there's so much, even today I get frustrated that there's this discussion about the global, the kind of geopolitics between the East and the West. And where's Africa in the discourse? And I say to people that, this is a continent that we, as Africans ourselves, we must figure a way how we become, basically self-sufficient, but remaining integrated with the globe. So at MTN, we're really passionate about this thing of, giving people dignity and hope. But the service that we offer is communication, and so the why at MTN is that sense of mission and zeal. So yeah, it's a great place. But always, as Patuma, when I joined, he said, Ralph, I cannot guarantee you happiness, but I can guarantee you'll never be bored. And that has proven to be very true 5 years after having joined MTN.
Wow. So Ralph, when I look at your traditional telecommunications operators, I say to myself, how long can you survive in this business model of voice, data, and whatever? With all these other threats that are coming in, and some of the threats are coming from the regulator who says you're charging too much for data. Some of them are coming from the fact that your equipment is expensive. I mean, for instance, in the South African market, you've got three big operators, which is the same size as America. Is there an existential threat to your traditional telecommunication operators, and are you dealing with that, and how are you dealing with it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you sound like one of my shareholders asking me the questions. I'm sure you're a shareholder as well. But I wouldn't say it's so much an existential threat, but I think the businesses have to evolve, which may end up being the same thing. And I'll say that for a couple of reasons. The telecommunication industry is poorly understood, and maybe it's an own goal by the industry in not explaining very clearly to the authorities and to customers that it is a very capital-intensive business. Just us as the MTN Group, we spend over $2 billion every year in putting, building radios, fiberizing our networks. I mean, that capital, which we get from shareholders, basically needs to get a decent return. So it's a very capital-intensive business. That's the first thing. Secondly, society sees it as a right that data should be cheap. And it's actually one of services that you'd ordinarily expect to be given by public capital, not private capital. When you and I grew up, we're using those phones that kids or grandkids today don't understand how we communicated on, but that was provided by public companies.
And you had public phones where you went on the corner and put some coins.
Yeah, I put on coins.
If you didn't have the coin, you wouldn't call.
If you don't have the coins, you can't
wouldn't
call.
ask the operator to lower the fees.
You wouldn't. Exactly. Thank you so much.
I interrupt you.
No, it's a great point, and you can come and help us with our PR at MTN. But I'm on a more serious note, I mean, I think what the traditional telco operators face is a need to reinvent themselves, to see connectivity as a platform amongst other platforms that are within an ecosystem of services that can be offered. What happened in the 2000s was that, it's the advent of the iPhone. The advent of the iPhone brought a rich amount of data capabilities onto the phone. And the operators missed that. And then the Apples, the Netflix, and all of those really understood that the value was in the services and not in the provision of the raw data in of itself. And that's why value shifted to the Netflix, to the Googles, and so forth, the old versions called the FANGs. But the big companies that put in the infrastructure, have got very low returns. So what needs to happen in the future, certainly my perspective, and I think that's where the company's perspective is that as we move from 4G to 5G and from 5G to 6G ultimately, is that capital or intensiveness of the business model will remain. But you don't have to put all your capital by yourself. You need to open up these networks. So we talk about open access, models where we now even share our own infrastructure. We've opened up our infrastructure where a third party can leverage the investment that we've made, they pay us a fee,
Right.
and we can deliver an adequate return on invested capital. So that's on the core connectivity. But off the connectivity are services, which is what people really want. While you're on the internet, there are services that you really want. And we want to participate in these services under our strategy that we have at MTN. So
is this part of the pivoting?
That is the pivot.
Yeah.
So the pivot from being a traditional telecommunications operator, because if you stay with that business model, it quickly, you quickly enter the terrain of being a utility, where it's as a business, you're providing a basic service, growth is very limited, return profile, could be challenged by one or two shock events. And as you say, the other thing is that it's a highly regulated industry. So private capital in a highly regulated industry, the only other comparator to that actually is mining.
Yeah.
And I often say to people, frequencies are like mining ore but in the air rather than underground. So mining and telecommunications are actually quite similar in many respects around just the forces that are shaping them. So, we are of the view that you've got to still focus on providing the core connectivity profitably, but also at a decent price to consumers. But there are the ecosystem effects. If you don't take advantage of them as an operator, someone else will. We have 272 million subscribers every day using our phones. So why don't we offer them this incremental service?
It's interesting, as briefly as we may, because we're running out of time, that this is an industry that came and disrupted a lot of things.
Yes.
Your MTNs, your whatever. In this being disrupted by new players, just comment briefly on that. The traditional player always being disrupted by something new. Now you're responding to what these players have come in and done in your marketplace.
Yeah, so in summary, what we're trying to do is, continue to provide the telecommunication services because it is bringing us to these 270 million subscribers. But we're saying we can offer these services ourselves. You don't have to use WhatsApp, you can use Ayoba from MTN. But we're also disrupting in some way or building on in some way where others have not gone as far. So banking has gone quite far, but we are going further with our mobile money business because we have the capillarity of distribution. Every corner of a street, there's an MTN agent.
Yeah.
There's no Standard Bank branch. You can say that to Sim tomorrow when you see him. But we're also taking the opportunity to disrupt ourselves. Otherwise, we'll get disrupted.
Yeah, eat yourself or somebody else will eat you.
Disrupt yourself, otherwise you'll get disrupted. So we have a little bit of that paranoia internally.
Good paranoia. Talk to me about the thinking behind the listing in Nigeria and the Ghana Stock Exchange and the divestiture from Cyprus. What's the thinking? What are you reacting to?
So, one of the things that the listing in our minds was a path towards ensuring that there's local participation in the success of the MTN businesses. These are very big businesses that 4 or 5 years ago would have been 80% plus owned by MTN. So they are huge businesses that are part of the national infrastructure of Ghana and Nigeria, and there's very little ownership of Ghanaians and Nigerians. That's not a sustainable construct. So we took a view that says we will sell down so that more Ghanaians and Nigerians have a stake in this particular company because the stakes were actually quite low. And because we believe that the more there's sufficient local ownership, it's a much more sustainable construct. Cyprus was part of our divestiture. It was our only business that was basically in Europe, but we still call it Middle East. We were looking towards cleaning up the portfolio and actually being much more kind of Pan-African focused,
I see.
as opposed to be this kind of global multinational business. And there's very little synergy between Cyprus or any of our markets.
Okay.
We're trying to simplify the portfolio. and actually try and reduce risk.
Let me take you now to the principles by which you lead, the habits that you, when you look back, you say, these are the habits that have made me be where I am, President and CEO of MTN Group. What are your leadership principles? What are the habits that make Ralph as successful as he has become, according to my measure?
I was about to say, I'm sure it's your measure. My sense is I'm still growing and developing, so I like to think I'm a work in progress, every day. But I would argue that some of what has helped me be where I am, I think I've got a very deep sense of self-awareness. I know where I'm strong. I don't need to be told that. And I know where I'm weak. I don't need to be told that. So I encourage this process of trying to master thyself, because you can engage with the world very honestly. So the continuous step of self-mastery, understanding where you are, because you also do evolve. What was made you successful at 40 might not make you successful at 50.
Absolutely.
So I would say, I practice my own techniques of self-mastery by having, kind of honest conversations with myself. I would also argue that I'm very clear around the skills and tools I have that can take me into different situations and give me a sense that I can do reasonably well in those situations. As an example, I said, at the core, my engineering mindset is about fixing problems and how do you approach problems and so forth. So I'm very clear of that tool set, and when I bring them in, and therefore I can build a team around me that complements where I lack. And I'm always looking for that, being honest with myself that I'm not as good as that person. But I think I'm relatively better than most, not always all, in being able to integrate these people. I practice quite a bit, the art of building and strengthening teams. I've read the book and I try and practice the team of rivals. I've managed teams that are like the team of rivals, and lived to see the day.
I've just collected mine from exclusive books today.
You collected
so,
it. No, it's a great book.
Looking forward to reading it.
Those are really good. Those are often the best teams, by the way. And then small micro habits. What time do you wake up? When do you go to bed? Do you put an exercise routine?
What time do you wake up?
I generally wake up between 5 and 5:30.
Okay.
Try and do a bit of exercise before. Try and read something that's nothing to do with work. Reflect on what I think should be, what will a successful day look like? Try and visualize. I do a lot of visualization. If today's going to be successful, here's how it's going to look. Here's how I'm going to look.
Wow.
And kind of walk yourself into. So
It's powerful. That.
And then the learning curve thing, just checking where the gradient is.
Where the strain is, where the tension is.
Luckily enough, my curve is still steep at MTN.
After 20 months. Let me put you on the spot now on two issues. You're passionate about building teams and leaning and relying on teams. One thing in building teams is obviously that at some point you're going to fire some people. How easy are you with that?
It's a difficult process, but you just know you have to do it. And often, the quicker you do it, the better. There is never an upside in delaying and vacillating. So as you say, it's a difficult thing, but it has to be done, and it must be done quickly.
I watched you somewhere saying, as we round up, Ralph, that find a greater purpose. You say you're growing. You say you are a work in progress. Take you back to your dream when you were 10 years old. You wanted to fly. What's Ralph's dream right now? What is your greater purpose?
No, my greater purpose, the way I think about it, is this point around, I'm really deeply passionate about being in situations and places that give Africans dignity and hope. I'm doing, and that's what gets me up every day, because when you see customers, when I travel the markets and I see customers, I can see the impact. Now, that could manifest itself in many forms. And, maybe that's why, I started life in engineering, I moved to financial services, I'm now at telecoms. I'm deeply passionate about this continent, and the hope, and my hope is that we realize the potential that we have inherently here. We have the people. It's a youthful population. We have the mineral resources. There's nothing Africa lacks. And, ever since I saw, as I mentioned, that scar as a 6-year-old, someone talking to my grandfather, my father, and calling them boys, I've said, what role do I play to give my people, and I don't want to use my people in a way that seems exclusionary, hope, and because I don't want, young black people to feel, Africans, to feel that we can't go to space. They can. And hopefully when they see you and me, they can say, hey, we can do anything. If Trevor can do it, I can do it.
Which is why we brought you here, Ralph, because I believe that your life journey, you construction, engineering, financial services, and now telecommunications will inspire a lot of young people out there. I'm not going to let you go before we talk books. And you really sound like a man who reads. Yeah. What books, Ralph, have you read? 3 books at least, that have been life-changing to you?
Yeah, I love books. My wife complains I'm buying them, not reading them lately. I tell her I'm reading board packs as a substitute, but my library gets built. I read very widely. Right now I'm reading the English version of the Quran. To my mother's chagrin, because she says, the only way to God is through Christ. So I'm having a bit of a discussion with my mother around that. But the books that I think were life-changing, and I read them at different. One is not really a book, but I think it can have some lessons, to some people listening in on this. Lord of the Flies, I read it as part of my O-level literature book.
Correct.
I still love that William Golding's book around British boys stranded on an island, dealing with issues of self-governance. And what comes out of there is just the fine line between good and bad. We often think of people as, inherently bad, but the line is very thin, groupthink. And it awakened in me this thing about, don't judge too harshly, because that line is very thin between good and bad. So Lord of the Flies, it is a book that, it awakened in me this point about the thin line. 4 Agreements, I read it in the early 2000s. I was, I think, just before I met my wife. So it must be close on to 20 years ago. And I try and live by those 4 agreements. You're asking me earlier about the 4, the habits. So I try and practice those 4 agreements. The one of those 4 agreements, which I often say to people, is sometimes it's not about you. When situations happen and people do things, it's actually not about you, it's about them.
Yeah.
And it's very important to learn. So that 4 agreements is... Then there's an A to Z of affluence, Deepak Chopra. So it's not really a book, but it's a 30-minute podcast. And he goes through the A to Z of affluence. And affluence is not about money, but he talks about affluence as an example, the lack of worry.
Okay.
And in D, he has the word Dharma. And Dharma means everybody has a purpose. There's no human being on this earth who doesn't have a purpose. Find your purpose, you act it, you'll be successful, you'll have affluence. So those, the 4 agreements and the A to Z, I listen to it at least 3 or 4 times a year.
Wow.
I just go back and quickly check, what can I learn now, which I didn't learn then.
Wow, what an awesome... This has been a business class, masterclass rather. This has been a masterclass. Ralph, thank you so much for creating the time.
Yeah, appreciate the time.
Jumping off a plane from Tehran and coming into the studio. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
We shall shake hands. I think it's a bit safe to do that.
Yeah.
Ralph, remain seated there. Allow me to tend to our viewers who are all over the world, who tune into In Conversation with Trevor on YouTube. We are out every Monday at 7 a.m. Central African Time. For you to ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversations, such as the one I've had with Ralph, please click onto this red button and subscribe. When you subscribe, you will get a reminder every time when we have one of these quality conversations. We've gone a step further and created podcasts for every conversation that we have, and they are on all podcast platforms. If you scroll below this video, there's a link that will take you to podcasts for your listening pleasure. Until next time, cheers to all.